Good evening. Welcome to the City of Lebanon Board of Zoning Appeals meeting for Monday, May the 2nd. Have a roll call, please.
Mark Vanneman, absent. Chad Kiger,
Here.
Bruce Pauley,
Here.
Ron Edwards,
Here.
Lori Gross.
Here.
Okay. We have, has everybody had a chance to look at the minutes? And if there's no objections or changes needed, would recommend a motion.
We just noticed that we have a spot, Matt, maybe you want to give a heads up, we've got the wrong person noted for the second on there, and probably a copying error from a plan commission meeting. It mentions that a second was made by a plan commission member, so we need to go back to the actual record, the video, and get that corrected, but I just wanted to make a note of that if you approve it, subject to us correcting that motion.
It was the motion to approve the minutes from the March 7th meeting. Shows that Lori Gross made the motion and Allie Mullen seconded it, which Allie is on the Plan Commission, not on the BZA, so we'll get that corrected, but everything else that I saw appeared to be accurate, so if you want to do it contingent upon us making that adjustment, you can.
Okay.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes as written with the one amendment to the motion.
Second.
All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Carries. We have two items tonight. Sorry. We have two items tonight. We have one old business and one new business. It's a public meeting, so anybody wishing to speak will need to sign in over here, please. And we'll start with the old business first. It's Docket 2228, Mann Brothers Holding, LLC, requesting 7 development standard variances to develop a gas station, fueling station, be located at 845 Indianapolis Avenue. The property is zoned PBC, Planned Business Commercial, and is in the Thoroughfare Overlay District. Ben?
Good evening, board members. I'll give you a quick overview of this site and this project, and then walk through each of those 7 variance requests. So if they want to bring up the screen for you, this is the site, as you'll see here. This is Indianapolis Avenue that kind of runs along the western side of this, and then Spencer Avenue, where State Road 32, where it turns to the east, that kind of wraps around the south end of the property. There is an industrial building just to the kind of northeast of the property, and then the parking area for that industrial building is to the northwest of that property. Let me pull up just so you can kind of get an expanded view of this area a little bit. That property, again, is what you see right here, and there's that large industrial building and the parking for that industrial building. The Casey's gas station, you'll see, is located right here just to the northwest, closer to Grant Street. And then I have a series of commercial uses along the west side of the road and kind of wrapping around to the south. As you go further east, then you can see it goes into more residential uses, but it kind of gives you an idea of what we're seeing in the surrounding area there.
Excuse me.
So this property was rezoned a couple of years ago to Planned Business Commercial. It was zoned General Industrial ID, rezoned to Planned Business Commercial. The surrounding properties remain zoned ID, which actually causes some of the issues that we have in terms of trying to figure out setbacks and buffer yards for the site. So before I go into each one specifically, this is a diagram that was provided to us by the applicant. The Thoroughfare Overlay District has a required buffer yard along Indianapolis Avenue of 20 feet, and that is in addition to the 50-foot setback, so a 70-foot setback will be required. That is represented like that you see by this red line that you see here. Because the property behind it is zoned General Industrial ID, that also has a buffer yard requirement to the rear, and plus the setbacks will provide the setback that you see here in red. So just in general, before we get specifically into the variances they've requested, you can see that the area where you could actually put a building on this site is restricted to this tiny area inside this red outline you see here. In other words, you couldn't put a building here because there's not enough space for it. So in figuring out how to design and develop this property, we realized that there were going to need to be some variances involved because the restrictions with the buffers and the setbacks on this site really make this site unbuildable for any use, much less the use was proposed here. So we knew going into this we were going to have to work with them to try to figure out appropriate setbacks and appropriate buffer yards to apply to this property to allow it to be feasible to be constructed with any use on the site And so that's what you see before you here tonight as the variances that would have been suggested. And I'll walk through each one of those kind of setback and buffer issues specifically, then we'll get into the seventh one that is related more to the use. So the first one, as I've suggested, is related to the front building setback. So again, I mentioned the third overlay district has the 20-foot buffer yard in addition to the 50-foot setback, requiring a setback in total of 70 feet. And the applicant is requesting relief to allow the building and canopy to set back a total of 50 feet as opposed to the 70 feet. And actually that applies primarily to the canopy that you see here. This blue line represents the 50-foot combined setback that they were proposing here, giving them relief of 20 feet from what would be required there. So that does, the building obviously you can see is set back a little bit further, but that does provide them some ability to put a canopy for the fueling area that you see here. The second one will be the front parking setback. Again, with the thoroughfare overlay district, you have the 20-foot buffer yard plus a 10-foot front setback, which would be for a total of 30 feet. And the applicant is requesting relief from this requirement to allow the parking to be set back a total of 20 feet from the front building line rather than the required 30 feet. And we'll go back real quickly just to compare. As you can see right now, there is no buffer along the front here. It is kind of just what is left of the paved parking area that connects directly to whatever sidewalk and or street that you see out front here. So there is no buffer that's provided at all. So they are actually going to be providing a 20-foot thoroughfare overlay buffer along the front here with the required landscaping, which is something that is not present on the site now. So that relief from the front parking setback would give them an additional 10 feet to work with in terms of providing parking and drive aisles, but still allow for the buffer along the front of the property. The third one is related to the landscape buffer requirements, and this one is related to the buffer requirement that is between a planned business commercial zone property, which this is, to an adjacent general industrial zone property, which is what's to the east here. And that is a required 25-foot buffer yard that also requires a 6-foot privacy fence and tree and shrub plantings. And again, kind of working through this plus the building setbacks, that would essentially render this property useless. So what we've done here is provided some relief, or they're requesting some relief to allow a 10-foot buffer width. And then the building then, as you can see here, would be set back approximately 10 feet from the property line, where about a 35-foot setback would be required between this property and the industrial property. They are providing the landscape buffer standard requirements in this 10-foot area, but they are requesting relief from that significant setback in order to provide for a building, as you see here. And then variance request number 4 would be the rear parking setback. Again, I mentioned it's a 25-foot buffer plus a 10-foot setback. So in essence, they're really looking here to be able to provide that 10 feet back there. And so again, rather than providing a total of 30 feet, they're asking for a setback of about 10 to 15 feet in most locations that you see here. So that would be the fourth variance, is the rear parking setback, or excuse me, I just discussed building, but the parking setback is what we're referring to. So you can see the parking as it runs along this property line here. You can see it as where it's located, and then also in some of these areas you see here to the kind of the northwest side of the property. That's where the parking will be located within the required setback. The fifth is side building setback, and again that would be related to this side of the building. So this would be rear that I already discussed. This would be side. So again, the very similar situation where you got the 25-foot buffer yard plus the side building setback of 50 feet or 15 feet for a total of 40 feet. So what we've done here is they're requesting relief to allow for the 10-foot side building setback that you see here, still allowing for the appropriate buffer standards within that 10-foot area. 6 is then the rear building setback, and we've kind of already discussed that. Again, the 25 plus the 10, so they're again reducing that down to 10 total. So that would be the 6th setback, and so again, that kind of just allows for a much more sensible building envelope that you see here, where they're still providing appropriate setbacks from the rear property lines and a setback which will allow for the buffer requirements that we would see there. And same thing for along the front, still provide for that 20-foot buffer width, but then allow them some flexibility on the front building setback to give them a little bit more of a building envelope and a little bit more area to provide for parking and drive aisles across that front than what otherwise would be permitted by the ordinance. So again, really looking at those 6 setback variances for building, parking, and buffer requirements to allow for an appropriate amount of building envelope for this property. and have suggested that there is a hardship based on the size of this property and all of the buffer requirements that this property is required to adhere to, both for the front and the rear, that significantly restricts it. I will walk through, I guess I probably don't need to go through each one of those individually, but I will mention that there are findings of fact for each of those 6 variances within the staff report for the record, and we have recommended approval of each of those 6 development standards for variance requests with no current conditions attached to them. The 7th variance request is related to a standard in our ordinance that suggests that fuel sales shall be limited to no more than 1 per block. And I will go back to this you see here, and the definition of a block, it's defined as property abutting one side of a street and lying between the 2 nearest intersecting streets, either crossing or Indianapolis Avenue, between Spencer to the south and Grant Street to the north. That's the definition of the block in this case. And that distance, I believe, is approximately, the distance of that block, if I'm not mistaken, is approximately 700 feet. Let me find it because I know I've got it in here. A little over 700 feet in length from intersecting street to intersecting street. There is no definition of a proper length for a block in the definition. It just indicates it's from street to street. So you have some cases in the city where we've got 250-foot lengths on the blocks, and some cases where we've got 1,500 feet length on the block. So this is roughly average, maybe slightly above average in terms of the length of the block. So in this case, because, as I mentioned before, Casey's is located here, there is already 1 fueling station located within this block, which would mean that no additional fueling stations could be located on the east side of Indianapolis Avenue between Grant and Spencer. And the applicant has requested relief from the standard to allow a 2nd fueling station within the same block. Walking through, I will go ahead and read the findings of fact related to this one. The first criteria, first finding, is that the approval of the variance will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. In this case, relief from the automobile fueling station limitation poses no imminent threat to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community, so we have determined they have met that finding. Finding number 2, that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. And staff analysis indicates that the requested variance for relief from the fueling station limitation will not affect the use and value of the area adjacent to the property in an adverse manner. The proposed use and improvements, including a new building and significant landscaping, will likely increase values in the area. The third criteria, the strict application of the terms of the Unified Development Ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. Another way to say that is there is something unique about this property that you would not find elsewhere in the community that is creating a hardship or restricting the use of this property. Staff analysis, the applicant has not presented evidence that the strict application of the terms of the UDO will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. The UDO defines a block as property abutting one side of a street and lying between the 2 nearest intersecting streets, either crossing or terminating. The fact that the address numbering changes from the 700 block to the 800 block is irrelevant, as the block definition is strictly defined by intersecting streets, not block numbering. In addition, the presence of alleys within the block does not define the start of a new block, as the block definition, again, is strictly defined by intersecting streets. Alleys, by definition, do not create the edge of a new block. The restriction of 1 fueling station per block is not creating a unique burden on the subject property that is not found in other blocks in other parts of the community. The subject block is approximately 725 feet in length. The length is, while slightly above average, but is by no means the longest block within the city. There are several that are well over 1,000 feet in length, as I mentioned before. In addition, the subject property corner is only about 300 feet from the property corner where Casey's General Store is located, so there is not a significant distance between the properties. Finally, an automobile fueling station is not the only permitted or viable use on the subject PB zone property. The strict application of the terms of the Unified Development Ordinance will not result in practical difficulties in the use of this property. Because we have determined that they have not met the requirements of all 3 of those findings. In the case of the request for relief from the fueling station use standard requirements, planning staff recommends denial of the development standards variance request to permit relief from the gas fueling station specific use standards of the Unified Development Ordinance. And that should be all of the 6 variances, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions? Thank you, Ben. Is Mr. DeHart here? Would he step forward, please?
My name's Adam Dehart, I'm project manager for Keeler Webb Associates. Our offices are located at 486 Grable Drive, Carmel, Indiana, 46032. I gave the BZA members a packet of information. We had some last-minute information that has been brought forward to us. We've gone out of our way to go out and meet with some of the neighbors, discuss this project with them. For time management purposes, I won't read each one of those letters, but I do want to read the owner's name and their address into the record so that you can get an idea of where these property owners are. The project itself, when Mann Brothers Holdings started into negotiations with Mr. Hunt, who owned the property previously, went to do the rezoning application with the city of Lebanon in December of 2020 is when the application was filled out. Went to the Plan Commission in the early months of 2021 and gained approval of the rezoning from rezoning this site from industrial to PBC. On that application that's included in the packet that I've given you, the proposed use was written on the application as a convenience store. The intent that was meant by convenience store was convenience store and filling station. The property was rezoned. After that point in time, Keeler Webb Associates was hired by Mann Brothers once they obtained the property to come up with some site plans that worked on the site. The site plan that's included in this packet that you see is probably about the third iteration of site plan to try to come up with the best fit for this use on this property based on the zoning requirements. The first 6 items that Ben went through thoroughly regarding the setbacks and buffer yards and parking setbacks, we concur with the staff findings 100% on those. What you will see in the newly developed site will be along State Road 32 and Spencer Avenue. There will be a 20-foot green area that will include all of the required buffer yard plantings. Normally that would be in a much larger yard, as has been related. We have the practical difficulty of being planned business commercial surrounded by industrial, so we literally have to buffer ourselves from industrial property, and that's what we represent around the north, east, and south sides of the property. Will be at least a minimum of 10 feet of green space that will include, again, all the required buffer yard plantings. We're just asking for relief so that we can physically place a structure on this site. Mann Brothers themselves are operating 17 convenience store gas stations throughout the 765 area code in northern and northwestern Indiana. Their existing stores range anywhere between Monticello, Lafayette, Frankfort, Muncie, Kokomo, Gas City, to give you an idea of where they're at. This will be their first facility that they're looking to put in with gas station here in Boone County. They have another project that they're working on South Lebanon Street that's completely separate from this matter, just so you know. It is going to be, that particular building is going to be a convenience store only. And again, everybody's intent when this property was purchased was the intent that we would be in a position where we could put a convenience store or gas filling station. And as I said, during our iteration of all the different site plans, we've actually had to reduce the building size to the bare minimum size that will actually work and function for the facility. The plan as you see it, including the purchase of the property and demolition of the existing buildings on site, represented a $2 million investment in the facility, pending our approval from this board and moving forward with the Plan Commission if we do get our variances approved. Another item I'd like to point out to the board, as I go through these letters, we do have 4 written letters from adjoining property owners that are immediately adjacent to this site. These people were also notified by required notice. One of those is Mr. Chuck Hunt, who owns property across the street on the triangle there between Indianapolis Avenue, Noble Street, and Spencer Avenue. He owns properties at 905 and 911. You can see from his letter that he's fully in support of not only the variances but the use issue. Also included in your packet is a letter from M&M Muffler and Auto Service. Their structure is located at Indianapolis Avenue and Noble Street on the northwest corner. And I might add that while this letter comes from the tenant occupier, we also had conversation with the owner, and he wanted his name attached to that letter. That would be Mr. Ron Trowbridge Sr. Also included is a letter from Jerry Richardson at Jerry's Feed and Salt immediately to the west across from this site. And lastly, we have a letter from Ron Smith, who's the owner at 840 and 842, which would be to the northwest of this site. In addition to that, we actually had personal phone calls with the owners of True Finds, who said that they were in support of this petition and didn't have any problem with it. I'm not here to put words in their mouth, but I don't have a letter from them. I'm just letting you know that we had the conversation with them. Likewise, we talked to Mr. John McConaughey, who's the plant manager at Johnson Controls, which is owned internationally by Phillips Industries. He had no problem with the project and asked if we would be building on their property in any way or interfering with their property in any way, and I assured him that all of our work would be on our property. He didn't have any issue with it, but he was having to forward our request on to corporate offices and corporate attorneys out of state, and unfortunately we did not get a letter back from them either. But as a local businessman, he was in favor of the project. Also in your packet, I have an additional Boone County GIS form that I understand what the ordinance says in regards to 2 filling stations in a block, but there's some ancillary information here that I think is warranted and worth taking a look at that. And the reason for our background on requesting that the ordinance is excessively restrictive. One has been mentioned, the Casey's convenience store and gas station has a 700 block address. I understand what he's saying about what the ordinance says and the definition, but please keep in mind too that this unusual subdivision that we're dealing with between our property and the Johnson Controls property has 7 lots and 2 existing unvacated alleys today between us and Casey's. At different times in the past, in the 50s, there's been a total of 4 additional alleys that have been vacated to consolidate properties, both on the Johnson Controls property and ours. So at one point in time, originally, there were, at the corner of Spencer Avenue, 6 alleys between and including our property all the way to Casey's. So again, we find this to be an unusual situation. We understand what the ordinance says, but we're asking relief from that. I might add one additional thing that we'd be willing to commit to, and another point that I wanted to point out, sometime in or around 2015, the Family Express filling station on North Lebanon Street had the Kroger news station put in immediately next door to it. I don't know exactly the timing on that in relation to the UDO. They all happened about that same year. I don't know if the UDO was changed because of that. I just wanted to point that out, that there is other circumstances in town where there are older existing filling stations that have been put in literally right next door to each other, which As you travel throughout the country and throughout the state of Indiana, you'll find that gas stations tend to be on opposite corners or next door to each other because it's a use and a need in that area. One last thing that we'd be willing to commit to, looking to the future, as we all know, everybody's looking at alternative energy sources. Right now, to our knowledge, in the city of Lebanon, there is not an electric filling station for electric vehicles. That's something that this owner is willing to commit to and add to this particular site. Also add that the use that's written in the ordinance is automobile filling station. It doesn't say gasoline filling station, it just says filling station. There's a possibility that filling stations may evolve over the course of time. This proposed site may evolve into more of a need for electronic fuel stations. We may have ethanol, we may have hydrogen power, but I just wanted to point that out, that the ordinance actually says quote-unquote filling station as opposed to gas filling station. And that's something that this particular owner is conscious of and wants to work towards in the future because they want to have a product that works for them not only now, but in the future. With that, we'd be available for any questions or comments you gentlemen might have. And ladies, excuse me.
Thank you.
Any questions from anybody? Okay, this is a public meeting. I'll open it up to the public if anybody would care to step forward and speak.
My name's Chuck Hunt. I formerly owned that building. We come to realization, me and my brother at one time, that possibly we weren't going to own it forever. We did put it up sort of for sale. The Mann brothers, we made contact and come to an agreement on price. First thing I did, I said, let's just sit, let's make sure the city wants this. So I contacted the mayor's office, had a meeting with Matt. He could not be there because his wife had COVID. And basically, they pretty well know me. I'm pretty blunt and to the point. Rodney Richardson was there. My realtor represented me. Joe McWaters was there representing the Mann brothers. And basically, I said, guys, is this something we want? We got an old building here, which I can keep using. It doesn't matter. I mean, sure, I got to have the money. It's the reason we put it up for sale, And they both agreed yes. And Ben was the first one to bring up that we had to change the zoning to meet that structure. The thing I'd like to say is, I still own 2 buildings in that neighborhood. We just rented the one building to John Lasley for his 4 branches nursery, just went through a bunch of zoning approval in here. And it's been a great improvement down through there, just seeing what happened there. That's the first thing you're going to see when you come in on 32. The very first thing you're going to see outside the backside of the factory. And I think it's a great thing. I think it's going to be a great thing for the neighborhood. I think it's going to be a great thing for the city itself. That's about all I got to say.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, we will close the public end of the hearing. Ben, is there anything else you want to say?
Just going to ask again if you had any questions for me based on conversation from the applicant and from the public hearing.
I'll make a motion to vote on each one of these variances independently instead of all together.
I'll second.
We need, got a second and a motion. I guess.
Second. All in favor?
Yeah, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous there. Okay, so we'll take them individually. Start with variance number 1. Need a motion?
Okay, is that the building setback?
Yeah, the number 1 would be the front building setback variance request.
I'll make a motion to approve the development standard variance to request to permit relief from the front building setback requirement.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Take roll.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Okay, that variance request passes. Variance number 2 is the front parking setback. For motion.
I'll make a motion to approve variance 2, the front parking setback, UDO section 7.5-F 2.1. To approve.
Second.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Okay, variance request number 2 passes. Request number 3 is a landscaping buffer requirement.
Make a motion that we approve variance request number 3, landscape buffer requirements, UDO table 7.10.
Second.
Motion and second.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Okay, the landscape buffer passes also. Request number 4 is a rear parking setback.
Make a motion to approve variance request number 4, rear parking setback, UDO section 7.5-F.2.1, or 2.I, excuse me.
Second.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
That motion passes.
Excuse me.
Variance number 5 is the side building setback.
Make a motion to approve the variance request number 5, side building setback, UDO section 4.13.d, as in David.
Second.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
That one passes also. Number 6 is the rear building setback.
I'll make a motion to approve variance number 6, rear building setback, UDO section 4.12.d.
Second.
Second.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
That motion also, or that variance also passes. Next one is variance request number 7, gas fueling station. The motion, please.
I'll make a motion to deny development standard variance request number 7 to permit relief from gas/fueling station specific use standards of the Unified Development Ordinance.
Second.
I'd second that.
Chad Kiger,
Just to clarify, we're voting to deny the variance.
that is correct.
So an
So
affirmative
a
would be
vote of aye would be to deny.
aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Okay, that motion did not pass.
Maybe to clarify, the motion did pass, but the motion was to deny.
Correct. Motion
To
did
deny.
correct.
Just want to clarify that.
Good job. Okay. Next item is new business, docket 21-5. The City of Lebanon Street Department requesting 3 development standard variances to construct a new highway garage to be located at 316 North Mount Zion Road. The property is zoned PBI, Planned Business Industrial.
This is coming back to you because of an error on notifications. This is the street garage that came before you early last year in January 2021. We received approval for 3 variance requests related to the project, and actually has gone to bid, and they started doing some site prep out there, and one of the neighboring property owners came in and said, what in the world's going on out there? I don't even know what this project is. So we went back and looked and found out when we did a GIS search for neighboring property owners that the search didn't bring up all of the ones that were required to be notified. So instead of notifying about 12 property owners, we notified about 5. So we did not meet the notification requirements for those adjacent property owners, meaning that those decisions by the board in January 21 are null and void. And so we are bringing it back to you now and having notified all of the correct adjacent property owners. The project has not changed. It's the same variance request that you had previously. We'll just have to redo those decisions now after having met all of the correct notification requirements for those adjacent property owners and also the notification that went in the paper. So we have done that and double and triple checked to make sure we made sure we had all those adjacent property owners included. But I will go back through the project for you tonight and highlight the 3 variance requests that were in front of you previously. Bring up site plan here. Got zoomed in too far. All right. So if they want to go ahead and bring up the screen, I think I've got it. This is the site. It is located right off of Mount Zion Road. That you see here, it's actually tucked back in behind the existing Gene Haas Center that's located here. And this is the site here with the proposed office and a building for storing of equipment and adjacent employee parking, customer parking, and also what you would typically find to the rear of the property. They do have the additional areas for recycling that they have on their site now, and then also site to the back where they would be able to have a place for the salt, again, like they see on their current site. The detention is proposed to the rear of the property. There's existing detention to the front of the property. So this is the overall site that you see here. The 3 variance requests are as follows. The first one was for parking area curbing, and the UDO requires all parking areas for non-residential uses to be completely curbed. Applicant is requesting relief from the curb requirement for the equipment materials area behind the building. This is something that we typically see quite a bit. My interpretation is both parking areas, like employee customer parking areas, but then also truck and equipment areas are required to be curbed. But we do see, and this board has seen a number of variance requests over the years for the truck and equipment areas to eliminate the curbing, curb and trucks, and the types of maneuvering that we've done back here. They don't really intermingle very well. So we see a number of folks that are requesting that variance. That may actually be something that we address in our upcoming update to the UDO to more specifically define what areas are required to be curbed and what may not be able to be curbed and what would not have to be curbed. But for now, because that's standard the way we're interpreting it, they are requesting the variance to allow relief from the curbing requirement to the rear of the property for the truck and equipment area. The second one is parking lot perimeter landscaping. For the very same reason as the previous one, we are considering this to be parking lot perimeter area to the rear of the property. And again, this is a truck and equipment area that is fenced in and as adjacent to other industrial uses, and so they are requesting relief from the landscaping requirement on this rear perimeter of the property, where it would be adjacent primarily to other industrial uses. Again, this is one that we see very regularly as it relates to truck and equipment areas. Again, trucks and landscaping don't intermingle very well. So in this case, we're looking to try to fence in this area and eliminate or request relief from that requirement. Again, something we may be addressing in the ordinance update to be more specifically outline what areas of parking lots are required for to have perimeter landscaping. And the third one, again, very much related to this rear of the property, is a parking lot interior landscaping requirements. We do have a 10% interior landscaping requirement, which was essentially requiring to install islands in the middle of the truck access area to the rear of the property. Again, as I've already mentioned twice now, trucks and landscape islands don't really work together very well. Maneuvering around those would be quite difficult. So again, for the same hardship and the same reason, there is a request for relief from this parking lot interior landscape requirement to allow the building to be constructed without the interior islands that would typically be required to the rear of the building. So those are a quick rundown of those 3 variance requests. For the record, there are findings of fact located in the staff report, all indicating that to the affirmative that they have been met. And with that then, the City of Lebanon Planning staff recommends approval of these 3 development standards variance requests to permit relief from the parking area curbing, perimeter landscaping, and interior landscaping requirements of the ordinance. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Ben? Thank you, sir. Kevin, are you representing the city?
I am. Thank you. Good evening. First and foremost, apologies. Apologies to this board and our neighbors. I know some of them are in the room. We did not intend to try to sneak this by or try to somehow not draw attention to the project. It really was an honest mistake with our noticing, and we're happy to come back tonight and correct it. We wish it didn't happen, but of course, things do happen, mistakes happen. I always believe it's how you respond to mistakes as opposed to the ability to be perfect is the real important thing in life. So we're here tonight to again, first and foremost, apologize for the mistake and the oversight on our part. Again, we respectfully ask for you to consider these variances. I think that Ben did a good job of outlining everything, but just to run down a few things, just to draw another round of attention to it. We're really talking, these variances are really pertaining to the rear operations area for the street department garage. The front visitor parking area is compliant with all the parking lot and landscaping requirements. So our variances, the 3 variances that we're requesting, are really pertaining to the rear yard or the rear operations area. And I want to remind everyone that that rear area is over 400 feet off of Mount Zion Road, tucked behind the building. Visibility is limited in that area back there, and that's been intentional on how we designed the layout of the site. Again, so we think this is consistent with other uses in the industrial park. We think given the setback and the visibility that these variances will not provide for any injury to public health or safety or the property values surrounding us. And we think just generally, as Ben said, it provides some practical difficulty to put landscape islands and curbs and perimeter landscaping around a operations area as it is. And again, typically these are not seen, and these variances are typically granted in these industrial areas. We are in zone PBI, which is consistent with the other properties in the area, which is why you don't see buffering between properties, because we have the same zoning classification. So with that, we'd like your consideration, but we understand that we've also misstepped here. We've met with some of the property owners. We've met with Mr. Nash, who was in the audience. One of the things that we discussed with him, he owns the old shopping plaza immediately to the north of the property. What we would like to offer there is that we will install an evergreen hedge along that north property adjacent to our fencing in that area. Again, it's not a buffering requirement. We just want to be good neighbors. We really do. We really felt like if we had the opportunity to have this conversation when this first went through the process, we would have committed to that. So we're happy to commit to that today. With that, though, we think that the prior decisions stand on their own merits. And again, apologize that the notice requirements were not met here today, and we're happy to talk about the project in further detail and hear any suggestions from you or our neighbors on how we can make this a better project for everybody.
Questions?
Kevin, how many city vehicles are we talking about? And just to educate me, will those city vehicles be stored on site there, or is it strictly just for maintenance?
It's both. So this will be the maintenance garage that will replace the garage on Lafayette Avenue that currently operates our stormwater department and our street department. Now, the building is sized so that all of our trucks and equipment can be stored inside the building. Basically,
Okay.
the building is a long drive-through garage is what it is. And it's got parking spaces inside the building for us to store all of those trucks and equipment inside the building. So we're not planning to have stuff parked outside, not on a regular basis. I'm not going to say nothing would ever be outside, but the building is sized to accommodate the parking of all of our equipment inside. That was really important as we looked into designing this facility. I would also remind you that all of our trucks, all of our big trucks, all of our small trucks, all the equipment that we drive around on a daily basis are all leased vehicles. So we don't do any maintenance or repairs on the vehicles. You're not going to see someone breaking down a truck in the backyard there trying to work on it. All of that stuff is shipped off through maintenance agreements we have with our leases. So that is one major operational shift that we made in the last couple of years, where we used to employ mechanics and we used to do all that work ourselves. All that work now is farmed out and done off-site. So again, I think what you see, this is really a storage building and a staging area. We will have some outdoor storage behind the building for things like stone and sand and salt in the wintertime. Those are all under a covered structure that we're building. And then outdoor storage for things like dumpsters for recycling and trash and things of that nature. Even though we are redoing our trash hauling contracts citywide, we are still going to maintain dumpsters and recycling containers at our street department, as we always have.
Thank you.
You say you will store salt on site also?
Correct, yeah, so there'll be a salt barn, if you will. It is a concrete walls up to, I think, about 6 feet in height, and then it is a domed vinyl covered roof structure that goes over that. That's open on one end for deliveries and removal of the salt and storage of the salt.
Any other questions? Thank you, sir. Once again, it is a public meeting. That being said, I'll open it to the public if anybody cares to step forward.
Good evening. I'm Larry Nash, and we own and operate the Lebanon Business Plaza, which has the parking lot adjacent to the proposed site as a whole. And I'm the neighbor that learned about this very, very late in the game, and I'd like to back up just a little bit and bore you with a detail or two. But 2 weeks ago to today, effectively, I noticed that someone had come on the property, which is right out our front door and windows, if you will, and started putting stakes in the ground. So I went over and I talked to that individual, and I said, "Can you tell me what's up?" And he says, "Well, they're getting ready to construct a building here." So what might that be? Well, that's going to be a maintenance garage. And he thought it may be a state unit, could be a city, he wasn't really sure. Well, how soon is this going to take place? Well, they're ready to get started this week. We've been working on this property, the i.e. old strip mall, if you will, for 15 plus years. I encourage all of you to go out and take a look at what's happened and transpired during our ownership, as well as the properties adjacent to us, be it the Paulsons and the ownership of the Holiday Inn, as well as the New Hampton Inn. And take a look at what's going on there visually as far as beautification and the investment that's been made. Keep in mind, at the Lebanon Business Plaza, we have 16 tenants in place, commercial tenants. They vary anywhere from Witham Medical Group to a daycare on the far end, and a lot of folks in between, including some state construction operations that we assist with their office needs while they're working on the interstate project. With that being said, 16 tenants, all of their employees, and all of their clientele that come and go every day are looking straight out the window at this proposed site. And if you were to stand in the parking lot and look across and realizing there may be a need for this, you really need to take a look at what they'll be seeing day in and day out. If you think you don't know what that looks like, go down on Lafayette and take a look at the existing site. I would have to believe that the same people that are going to be facilitating and maintaining that site are going to be maintaining the new site. Granted, it may be a new building, so on and so forth, but the fact of it is, it'll just be a matter of time when you're going to see things sitting outside. They're going to be housing a minimum, according to the plans, of 22 tons of salt on location. None of us want to look out the front window and see a salt pile, whether it's contained or whether it's not contained. The other thing I should bring up, it wasn't many years ago when we first acquired the plaza, we met with the city, we made some substantial improvements in the plaza as far as the entries, the exits, that sort of thing. We put quite a bit of landscaping in, some irrigation in, so on and so forth, and we maintain that to this day. But it was proposed a number of years back that there was going to be a state garage on this exact site. It was going to be put in place as a highway maintenance unit to replace what was, in my understanding, out on 52 where it meets I-65. We got together as a group of ownership, surrounding areas. We had some representation, and we opposed that at that time, and it was overturned effectively. And it was all agreed that it was not in the best interest of the public to have a garage and a maintenance facility, trucks coming and going throughout the night in between hotels, motels, et cetera, and obviously it's going to affect the traffic pattern there as well on Mount Zion Road. So this has already been to a state of opposition at one point, and I think it's important that we bring that back up, that this is, in my opinion, a use that is not the best use by location for that facility, is what it comes down to. It's obviously an eyesore across the board. It certainly is going to offer some additional, what I call noise pollution. These trucks that they operate, some have backup alarms, so on and so forth. You're going to hear that. It's going to offer something what I call light pollution. When you have a hotel across the street looking down on that property, I don't think that's very favorable, and I think if the Paulsons would certainly have an opportunity to say there are folks that won't be a return customer for them if they certainly have a bad experience there. So I can understand there's got to be a city maintenance garage somewhere, but I don't think this is the place it should be. So I'm in opposition of the entire project, if you will, as a whole. Obviously, I've come to the game late because when I learned about what was going on, I went up to the planning group over here and asked what was going on. That's the first I heard of it. They said, I asked them, I said, how long has this been worked on effectively? And they told me that it was December of 2020. I think if we look back in the records, some of this was taking place in December of 2020. We've been there for 15 plus years. We've owned and operated it solely. We have never had a phone call, we've never had a visit, and we never had a letter show up at our door that said, this is what's going to go on. What do you think? Do you have any input? Kevin was certainly gracious enough last week to sit down with me. We discussed some of the pros and the cons. But certainly, I live there every day, and I see what goes on. And I think that no question that this should be reconsidered as a whole package. This gentleman asked about salt. I mean, it is not going to be good to look out across your parking lot into a big salt pile or gravel pile, or talking about recycle. Go down there in Lafayette and take a look at what the recycle grounds look like down there. That's not a pleasant sight. Just simply take a snapshot of that. Come back into our area today and take a look and drive through there, and you'll see the beautification that is taking place there and the people that have made the investment to make that happen. The other thing is, I've certainly talked to Duke. Duke was a big part of the opposition of this before. And Duke says, again, we don't want an eyesore with people driving down the corridor, in the corridor to basically the park, if you will, that being one of the entrances, and certainly it's not very appealing. In the early years, I say going back 15 plus years, and I shared this with Kevin as well, I was asked to be on a small group that talked about the corridors that led themselves into Lebanon, be it exit 138, exit 139, exit 140. We talked about all the great things that can be done to beautify the entryways. When somebody gets off the interstate, they're driving into town, they look up, there's a beautiful sign, maybe there's florals there, there's vegetation, there's a message, whatever. To this day, we don't see that in any corridor at all. And I think it's a mistake to put something like this in the public view when there are so many other options of locations within this community where people don't have to be influenced and don't have to take a look at and don't have to be listening to trucks, backup alarms, so on and so forth, coming and going. And I just don't think it's proper use for the project. Again, I have to reflect back on why this was turned over at one time as a state possibility, and I have to say, all we're doing is repeating the same thing with a different name on the building. So I ask for your consideration. I'm not sure this is the time and place to do that. I'm not privy to how you all function, but I thought it important to address this tonight, and I'll be happy to put whatever in writing to support what our thoughts are, what our tenants' thoughts are, and certainly answer any questions that you may have.
What are your thoughts about Kevin's proposal about putting a landscaping buffer?
Well, certainly Kevin and I got along well. We had a nice meeting, and I think I appreciate the suggestion. I think that there's some things that can be put along the edge of our parking lot, if you will, in between that and the building. But I think if you look at the elevation arrangement there and where the building is going to be postured, and the fact is, if the building is elevated like it's proposed, and that area in the back, if you will, that's up against the tree line back there, is going to facilitate, again, recycle additional stone content, so on and so forth, with a barrier of some sort. I don't think that's going to get the job done. I think that's a step in the right direction, but it certainly is going to take years to have enough growth to even demonstrate a shadowing or a block or something that's going to affect the visual side of this, is my opinion on it. And
Any other questions?
Your strip mall, I know that's not the subject of this variance request, but I'm looking at a map here. I don't see any landscaping buffer between the back of your strip mall and the hotel, the New Hampton Inn.
no, there was a
you.
retention pond there.
I see dumpsters, I see parked cars. Just curious why that you wouldn't have a landscaping buffer behind your property if that's important to you.
We actually went to the expense to clean that up back there ourselves because we couldn't get any help from the hotel folks and or from the city. We took a complete fence line out of Cyclone Fence back there adjacent to the retention pond to, again, get rid of that eyesore that's been there for years. That is not our property, number one, but we went ahead and did that anyway to facilitate that. We'd be happy to put something. There was never a complaint about that. There was never a concern about that. I think that's quite honestly, an entirely different matter. But certainly if there was a need to put something between that and the hotel, we'd be happy to do so. And I should also share that that building has been there since 1995 and 96.
Other questions?
I have a question for Ben
Well,
or Kevin.
you're going to have to wait a minute, so. I guess that's all right now. Anybody else care to speak?
I understand mistakes can be made, and I appreciate the fact that you've given us this opportunity. Thank you. I'm Zane Paulson from the Holiday Inn Express. near where this project is coming up. And I guess one of the things that was said was that it wouldn't have any effect on property values. So I would ask you, if you look at these facilities, I don't see how that can possibly be true. If it is, I guess you'd have to let me know, because I don't see any way that it could improve the property values, so it either have to be the same or be less, correct? Number two, this meeting tonight is just about the variances. It's not about whether the approval of the construction. Is that correct?
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah.
It's about the variances only, the 3 variances only.
Okay, so I really don't, the variances, I think that's up to you. I'm opposed to the construction. I feel that we're putting up people that are sleeping, and because of the traffic and the noise, particularly late at night when it gets into the ice season, that would have a real adverse effect to our business. But as far as the variances are concerned, that is not my concern. That's your business, not mine. So if that is the case right now, I really have nothing further to take up your time, and thank you for the little time we had.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sir?
I'm Dave Newell, I'm the street commissioner, Stormwater Street Department. Don't know if anybody knows me, but to address their concerns about the building, yeah, if you go look at our department, it's pretty rough, and that's why we've addressed this. We're looking for a site because we don't have a room for our trucks, so everything does sit outside. That facility we're at was built in 1960 something by Triangle Asphalt, and the city acquired it from them, so it was never designed to be what it is. I think the police department built a building onto us at one point. It was a little bit before my time, but and he is correct about the recycling. It blows out when it gets windy, and that morning I have my guys out there picking it up. And we even modified a little bit to try to help that, where we have Rays come in once a week to empty the recycling. We used to just do it when it was full, so we're trying to be better neighbors, you know, and have it emptied more often. It's hard to keep the site clean when we have our big heavy trash days and stuff like that, so those are going to be going away hopefully. So try to be friendlier neighbors that way. The plans of the building, the facility looks amazing, I think. I mean, definitely won't be an eyesore. We went out of our way to try to make it look nice, but kind of like he said, you guys are just kind of approving something, not really denying the project. So we do have backup alarms on our trucks. I mean, that's a safety issue, so can't get past that. We're just trying to get out of a residential area into a more commercial area, and that's kind of what we thought the business park was. So, I mean, the only reason that property I think came up was because it's already city owned, so it's more of an expense thing, honestly. But that's all I have. I mean, our property does look rough, but just bear in mind it's been there since the 60s, and you know, it's just wear and tear on it really, and everything we have has to sit outside, so that's why it looks so bad. But that's all I got.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Okay, we will close the public end. Ben, we are just working with the variances only, correct?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out, I know there was a lot of discussion for the remonstrators about the use of the property. I will point out this is a planned business industrial zone site. This use is a permitted use on the site. What we're discussing tonight is the idea of relief from curbing and landscaping along a truck and access area, which is very similar to other industrial uses in this area. So even if you were to deny the variances tonight, they could redesign the site with curb and landscaping and still build the building because it is a permitted use. So that what we're discussing tonight is the 3 variances related to curb and landscaping.
I don't have a whole lot more to add, and I'm certainly not really trying to refute anybody's comments. I would offer that, you know, originally the state garage project, I was around for that, not in my current role, but actually I was sitting where you guys were. at that time on the BZA. So I do remember that project. It's been a long time, but I will say that the one difference is that that was a state garage that was going to take up the whole property that is currently housing the GNOS Center and then proposed to house the Lebanon Street Garage. So it was a much larger garage facility with much more equipment, much more truck storage, much more salt and other material storage. So this is a smaller project. Traffic, heard those concerns. I understand that. For the most part, our street department works from 7:30 in the morning to 4 o'clock. That's pretty much 5 days a week is what we do. Of course, when they have snow emergencies, they are working after hours, and there's no way around that. But what I would say is I guess I would ask you, is the traffic generated by the street department in a snow emergency, I think it would certainly be less than the state department in a snow emergency, and I would say that traffic generated by this garage is far less than obviously the 70,000+ cars a day that drive by the interstate. And the noise, the light pollution, the other pollution that you see from the interstate that is essentially adjacent to this property. Light pollution, the site will be designed, the site is designed compliant with our site lighting standards. And as well as any other standards have been met. The views from the hotel, I'm sympathetic to that. I would point out that it's 440 feet away to the front of our garage building from the right-of-way of Mount Zion Road. So you got to cross Mount Zion Road, you got to go across the parking lot of the hotel before you get to hotel rooms. And then our maintenance area is behind that garage, so much further away yet still. And I would argue that is the view any less or more detrimental than the Hendricks factory outdoor storage yard that is immediately adjacent to our property that those same hotel rooms would be looking over today. So I just offer that to you. We want to be good neighbors. We want to work with everybody. We want to provide some additional landscaping to be sympathetic to the concerns. But again, I think that given we are in an industrial area, I think you would find that we're a much less intense use than what could be put in on that property or what is happening adjacent to our site with 24-hour-a-day factory operations. So with that, if there's no other questions for me, I'll leave that to your decision.
Thank you, sir. Discussion amongst the board. Not seeing anybody wants to speak, entertain a motion.
I make a motion to approve docket 21-5 as written.
Second.
Chad Kiger,
Aye.
Bruce Pauly,
Aye.
Ron Edwards,
Aye.
Lori Gross.
Aye.
Motion carries. Do we have any other business to talk about tonight? Okay. Our next meeting would be Monday, June the 6th, here in this room at 7 p.m. How about a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned.